Words are not the only means of communication. Gestures also communicate. Some gestures are used in more than one culture, others differ from culture to culture. Sally had lived abroad most of her life, but the last she came back to England to live. She had always loved trees and flowers, and now she aimed to buy a small house in the country with a garden. In the development of civilization, the use of tools grew and multiplied. Later, the use of steam power revolutionized the whole industrial organization and transportation. The motive for the voyages of Christopher Columbus in 1492 and of John Cabot in 1497 was to find a shorter route. However, the journeys across the Atlantic Ocean brought the Europeans knowledge of the American continents. Not the spices. The discoveries affected the history of the world. John has a problem. Japan has a problem. Japanese girls don't want to marry Japanese farmers anymore, and by the end of the century, over half the villages in Japan could be ghost towns. According to official statistics, 600,000 Japanese visited Britain last year. At that rate, Britain will be welcoming 1 million Japanese tourists by 1993. Tokyo produces more than 5 million tons of garbage per year and an average of about 1 kilogram per person per day, and getting rid of it all has become a major headache for the authorities. A large population of Tokyo's trash is waste paper. A human language is a signaling system. As its materials, it uses local sounds. It is important to remember that basically language is something which is spoken. The written language is secondary and derivative. The significance of malaria in colonial history can scarcely be overrated, for it was a major handle in the development of the American colonies. To the newly arrived settlers or fresh Europeans infrequently proved the fight out. European sailors were afraid to sail straight westward into the vast unknown. That way to Asia seemed too many miles, for you had to be able to go there and back. A temple like that of Olympia was surrounded by statues of victorious athletes dedicated to the gods. To us, this may seem a strange custom, for however popular our champions may be, we do not expect them to have their portraits made and presented to a church in thanksgiving for victory achieved in the latest match. In 2000 years, all our generals In 2000 years, all our generals and politicians may be forgotten, but Einstein and Madame Curie and Bernard Shaw and Stravinsky will keep the memory of our age alive. Older people usually find it more difficult to acquire the new skills required by technological changes, and they do not enjoy the same educational opportunities as young workers. Even advanced nations of Western background, if they happen to be small, frequently find it necessary to utilize foreign languages for many purposes. A Danish scholar, for instance, will find it more sensible to publish in English for a world audience than in Danish for a limited number of fellow Danes. Much has been spoken and written about the past experiences of war, and we all know the effects of war too well. Yet, in the name of peace, the stockpiling of armament is going on, and we are told that safety lies not in disarming but in rearming. Thin salted crisp potato chips are Americans' favorite snack food. They originated in New England as one man's variation on the French fried potato, and their production was the result not of a sudden stroke of cooking invention, but of a fit of anger. Dogs communicate in many ways. They not only bark, but they howl, growl, snarl, and whine. Animals communicate with each other not only with sound and movements, but with smell. Reading aloud is an educational tool as well as an instrument of culture. As an educational tool, reading aloud is aid to greater accuracy and better understanding of the written word. The Western way of thinking is analytical. If a Westerner has a problem or wishes to discuss a complex subject, he tries to analyze it. He tries to break the problem or subject down into separate parts. When I speak of internationalization, I do not mean the changing of external lifestyles, but the development of internal new attitudes. Our motivations must be in step with the conditions of the time. Although some well-to-do people objected to free schools because they would have to pay taxes to educate the children of others, most Americans realized that public education was important in a democracy. The stranger in London, especially if he has come say from Paris, find London at first a real drab, but later on as he explores the city and begins to make friends, he finds that it has its own special intimacy and charm. We are creatures of the visible and the perceivable. If something cannot be seen or felt, we imagine it does not exist. We feel pity for the physically disabled because we can see his twisted limbs, but we are indifferent to the emotionally troubled because their troubles are buried into their head. Buried. Typical American teenagers, and in fact very ordinary, they think their teachers make them work too hard. They love their parents, but are sure they don't understand anything, and their friendships are the most important things in their lives. Advertisers use many methods to get us to buy their products. One of their most successful methods is to make us feel dissatisfied with our service and our imperfect lives. Advertisements show us who we aren't and what we don't have. How the water is used affects the supply. In some dry areas, groundwater is used for irrigation. Most of this water changes into vapor and disappears from the surfaces of plants or ground. Reading and learning ability depend on something more definite than broad general knowledge. To a significant degree, learning and reading depend on specific broad knowledge. The reason for this is that reading is not just a technical skill but also an act of communication. All the classic works of children are written in that language, often of a very high standard of literary style. They are sometimes difficult to read. The reason for this is that children's books were not written just for children. The novelist presents us with people. He tells us what kind of people they are, whether they are good, bad, or indifferent. Within the limits of a book, he tells us what happened to the people brought to our attention. The story depends on what they do, and particularly what they do in relationship with each other. The difficulty when strangers from two countries meet is not the lack of appreciation of friendship, but different expectation about what constitutes friendship and how it comes into being. To the people of ancient Egypt, life on earth was short. Life after death, however, was eternal. Therefore, they built their tombs of stone and they took their positions with them into another world.